Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast. This is the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions from the worlds of TV, film, pop culture, social media, music, lifestyle, news, everything really depending on the guest. We talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, you know me as Peter Beats. My guest is an actress, filmmaker, recording artist, and brand ambassador. We are with Tamela D'Amico. Tamela, welcome to Popternative.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I mentioned right off the top, you wear many hats in the entertainment industry. How important is it for you to wear many hats and not just do one thing?
It just was sort of born out of necessity. I think, a lot of actors have side jobs. Mm-hmm. My side jobs happen to be my other arms of career. So if I'm not directing something, I'm acting in something or I'm recording something. So it's just sort of kept me afloat through the years.
Absolutely. And you do have, it's always exciting when you have kind of a movie that's coming out soon. And you do have a movie coming out in November. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called One Little Finger. It was a film that I went to India to film over 2 years of my life. The film took about 5 years to make, but I was there back and forth for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I play an American neurologist who goes to India to research my thoughts about music therapy and working with the disabled. And when I get there, I work at a disability institute and implement my theories that happen to work. I change the lives of these kids who realize that they have ability in their disability. And that's basically the theme of the entire movie. Like, first of all, working with disabled people or people who are challenged as per working with other actors, these people, first of all, most of them are actors in their own right. And then I worked with students at a school who actually trained, not having any acting background, for 6 months before I got there. And they actually do have musical abilities. So in the film, I'm trying to, act as if I'm teaching them. But when I got there, their musical abilities are incredible. And within the message of this film, we talk about people first language, which is super important in our industry now, because a lot of people are now talking about diversity and inclusion and having people of all walks of life be a part of what they want to do.
Yeah.
And people first language institutes the belief that we don't say, oh, this is a disabled person. This is a person, she has cerebral palsy. You're putting people in a box when you do that. So you say, this is my sister who happens to be a nurse and she also has cerebral palsy. You don't put their disability first. You put them as a person first. So within the film, my character basically teaches these kids who have challenges that, hey, what is it that you want to do? Let's work on that. Let's see if you can do it. And then through me, they do end up doing it, but really it's the realization of their own work that they're like, wow, I wanted to do that. I just didn't really give myself permission to.
Absolutely. And for you specifically as a storyteller and actor working on this film in India, what were some learning experiences for yourself specifically with this film?
Well, it's so interesting because I went there as an American actress to India. I'd never been there before. It's a complete culture shock in a lot of ways, but not the ways that are put towards people.
Yeah.
They're like, Americans know nothing about India. So I felt like what my character was experiencing, I was experiencing. India is a world of color. There's a million new things to discover there, but simple things, just as a person going there, they have a different water system, let's say, right? So I was there for 2 weeks taking cold showers because I didn't understand how you turned on the hot water. And I had to go to an American Girl's blog because we were shooting in some rural areas. So I had to go to an American Girl's blog while I was there to basically learn what I needed to do, because the people who I was staying with, they had no American experience. So I kept asking them about the water and they were like, we do have hot water. What are you talking about? But nobody told me how to turn it on because they figured I just knew. But anyway, beyond that, going there was such an incredible experience because, first of all, as an American, you're going into a world where the infrastructure is completely different than American filmmaking. Everyone there works just as hard, but they work longer. There's no unions. So imagine what that is like. And everyone is so welcoming. Like, for every American person that comes there, there's like 150 Indian people that are willing to bring you into their world and genuinely want to know you. It's just a different culture. Yeah. Americans tend to be more standoffish, but I was treated like gold, and the experience of just being within the culture and also within the storyline, learning actually myself about disabilities. At any moment during the year, someone can become disabled. You don't have to be born with a disability. So that was a learning curve, because then I started thinking of things like, is there a ramp in this building? You know what I mean? Those are the things now that you think about. And everyone that I work with in the film, they are leaps and bounds. Their abilities as humans are leaps and bounds above anyone I've ever worked with. Like, they are novelists. They have a million other abilities that you just wouldn't think unless you talk to somebody. And I think in America, culturally speaking, people tend not to look someone in the eye who's in a wheelchair. You know what I'm saying? We've all done it. Everyone has done it. And it's just because it's not talked about. So this film is more than just a movie. It's a movement. It's about inclusion. It's about, putting things out there, letting people who actually have, whatever their character trait is in a film, let them play it. Give them the opportunity to audition.
It sounds like it was overall just like an eye-opening experience for you.
It was major. Yeah. I mean, it's a life-changing thing. Yeah. And it was something I sort of manifested. Like, I think I'm supposed to go to India. And then 2 weeks later, I got this movie out of the blue. Completely bizarre. But yeah, definitely a life journey. Something I probably will never come across again. But yeah, it was pretty interesting.
I mentioned on the top, and I've interviewed people like yourself that kind of wear many hats and do a lot of different things. They act, they do the filmmaking stuff too. They do the producing, the writing. They also do the recording artist things. And I always ask them, out of the 5 or 6 things, what's your favorite one? And a lot of people, consensus is a lot of them say acting. What is it for you? Out of all the ones, which one do you like the most?
I think the reason why people say acting is because when you wear so many hats, you are responsible for the product. When you're an actor, you are the product in one sense, and you get to walk in, do your part, and go home. If the film's not yours, you know what I'm saying? So the responsibility is to your craft and to give that performance, but the film's responsibility is not yours. So I love to do anything where I go in and perform, give my all, and then get to leave. So I think that's why people say that. So directing a movie is really long.
Is acting one you prefer to as well then? On that list?
I wouldn't say prefer. I'm a storyteller in all realms. So at my core, I'm just a storyteller no matter what I'm doing.
And when did you decide that you wanted to do storytelling? What kind of drew you to the idea of telling stories?
I was kind of a weird kid. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my siblings are much older. And I think my mom was holding on to her baby. So I didn't go to preschool. And I watched New York's Nostalgia Network, which is essentially Turner Classic Movies, that kind of thing. And there was old I Love Lucy on there. A lot of old black and white stuff. So a lot of those old shows, or the Judy Garland show, they were storytellers. Their presentation was all about storytelling. And then I had seen on I Love Lucy that they went to California. And I didn't know what California was, but it seemed super exciting. And I was like, I'm going to go to California. This is at 5 years old. And then from there, my parents were very good at nurturing what each of us was good at. So that she just was like, oh, she's into drawing, or she's into this, whatever. And it was just very welcoming. So I didn't know any different, that it was something to be attained, or that something that rarely people get. I just did it because I was allowed to do it.
That is very true. I always find too, there's always it's always certain specific experiences. I'll have I ask a lot of people that question about when they got into storytelling, and some of them are just I don't know, I just, my grandparents made me watch, I watch movies a lot with my grandparents, and I said I want to do this, you know what I mean? Or sometimes it's a specific experience that kind of drew you to that. And a lot of it starts also with I act now because I always love putting on plays for my parents and everything. And a lot of it I find starts when you're pretty young as well, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was very young. I felt sort of reincarnated. I sing jazz, and it's that's not a normal path to music for people. So I think probably from watching a lot of old movies and things like that. But I come from a ginormous Italian family where everyone is trying to get a word in edgewise, and it's like, who can be the biggest storyteller in the room, kind of, So I think that's probably where that came from. But really, from like age, whenever you're first in school to about 9, I was just a sponge. I watched everyone. Like, I didn't really talk very much.
See, I'm half Italian as well too, and that's where I think we get like the hand gestures. Yeah. I'm half Greek, half Italian, so
you got it all.
Yeah, I know. So it's a lot of that. Yeah, because I've noticed it's not as obvious as mine, but like sometimes when you're talking, there's like some hand gestures, and that's like
there's a lot of passion. We're passionate people.
It's important. It's really fun. In regards, it's really fun to have conversations about like the making of like content, because I think that's something that like I always love hearing about in terms of, you mentioned your film in India, but other things. I mean, what do you enjoy the most about creating content, whether it's a song you're recording, whether it's, some of the social media content you're doing as an ambassador influencer? What draws you to content creation, Tamela?
I just love, first and foremost, I love to make people laugh. It's just a thing, but I just have this incessant need to create. Yeah. Like some people who love to garden, they're like, I got to get my hands in the earth. I got to make something grow. Mm-hmm. That's me with everything else. So it's like my mind constantly works in cinematic visuals. And sometimes you just see something, a couple having dinner, and we play this game usually, my friends and I'm like, you can always tell when someone's on a first date, and then we just start making up what their story is. We're like, that guy works in banking. He's totally boring. Right now he's given his best story. Wow. Like, you can just like take scenarios, and maybe they're possibly not even true, but it's fun to like imagine and dream up. I
hope you write them down and keep them as scripts.
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. But it's just, I just feel like my brain works in a very weird way. Like, I'll walk into a room and I think like, wow, who painted this? Like, who thinks that way? Yeah. That's not a normal way to think, but I have a genuine curiosity, like, wow, this is so great. Who painted this? Or what's the story here? That's basically my tagline for everyone. I'm like, so what's your story? I love learning about people. And then like, you tell me your life story and then I will repeat it back to you, basically. No, it's like, I'll be like, oh, so this is what you just told me. And it gets like deeper ingrained. And then by doing that, then you sort of learn a little bit more about yourself too. Like, why did you want to, become a journalist? I mean, this is a form of journalism. Why did you want to become a podcaster?
Yeah. You're asking me?
Yeah. Like, why did you?
Great. Yeah. No, yeah. Absolutely. No, I think I was always drawn. I mean, my background was in communications. That's where I did my master's in school. And I think I was just always kind of drawn to the idea of doing some kind of like talk show or kind of media where I kind of interview people. Like, I've always loved interviewing. I'm from Canada. Hockey's a big thing. Sports reporting and everything was always something I wanted to do. So it was always there, the kind of like the skeleton of like an interview show was always in the back of my head. And then you just gotta get submersed into the culture, and you get exposed to different movies and different styles of music, and then you're realizing like, wow, it's interesting. There's so many different people to kind of interview. You know what I mean? And you don't want to just limit yourself just to sports, because this show started in 2015, and there's some pop culture always involved, but there was a lot of sports-based stuff, and then it kind of evolved into storytellers. You know what I mean? And some could argue sometimes that an athlete, like, they're performing, right? It's a performance. Performance, sure. You know about this, is storytelling. Yeah. So I always found that interesting, because it's like, who do you interview? And I'm always like, you know what? Even with the athletes, I interview storytellers. That's like what I do on Popternative.
Yeah. But in essence, that's what I was going to say. Don't you feel we're kind of one of the same? It's just a different medium, because you too are a storyteller. Yeah. And in a different way. And I just think it comes from a genuine curiosity for myself, and probably yourself, of wanting to learn about people. Like, I have a genuine interest in people. Like, what is your story? How did you do it? How do you get through this thing on Earth your way? Like, what is that like? Here's my way. Is there any correlation, or what can I learn from you? I like feed off of that.
And I think, too, what you brought up, which I find very interesting as well, is you brought up, that technically, podcasting and interviewing, you know what I mean? If you look back at traditional standpoint, is media, you know what I mean? It's media, it's press. But I feel like a lot of people like myself, who have their own podcasts, who do interviewing, like I do myself wear many hats. I do a lot of stuff. I do marketing, I do social media, I do PR as well, and I do media. So it's like the media it's not like traditional kind of media anymore where they're just doing interviews. They're seen as other people. They're making films. They're doing marketing communications for corporate companies, and then they also have a podcast, and they're doing media publication. You're not just limited to you could do many different things, I find. Do you know what I mean?
Which, I'll tell you, when I first started my career, people who don't understand that at the time, now you have to be, it's called a predator, producer, writer, director, editor, right? You have to be everything in order to make your stuff fly as a content creator. So when I first came out here, I was like recording artist track, I was acting, but I also went to film school. So they're like, you have to pick one. And I'm like, well, why do I have to pick one? Because it makes you feel better. Because you can focus on one thing and you don't know how to do. I've always been a multitasker, but my goal was always, if I'm going to do it, I'm doing it 100% in that arm. Yeah. So I think because I claimed myself, I'm a multi-hyphenate talent, that was disturbing to people. They didn't like it. Like, well, who are you to do that?
Same thing with me.
It's the way. It's the way now. You can't.
I don't think people are used to that too, because I think that people do you ever have the situation where you're like, well, it's easy to wear many hats, or it's just natural to me. And then you kind of make that bad assumption that what you're able to do and tackle and the multitasking, you assume that everyone else can do it. And it's not the case. So you're kind of going in with this false impression of what it is, because it happens. You know what I mean? Some people won't be able to multitask.
And some people think, oh, that person's unfocused. That's not what it is at all. What happened with me from a very early age is being in a classroom and there's a group project. And what happens? You're the team leader. Mm-hmm. People picked you as the team leader, right? Yeah. It happened to me. And I was like, well, I can do it because I can do it. I didn't necessarily want to do it. And then I was like, oh, it's just easier if I do it because I did have those skills. And then everybody relies on you. So it sort of was born there that I was like, it's easier for me to whip all these things out, plus also have the track that I'm also performing in this thing or writing this thing, because that was a strength I had. So it was like other people elevated that. And then now, when you have your own production company, I team up with a lot of people on projects because they're like, I have a great idea. I don't know how to execute it. You do. How can we team up? And if I think I can make their idea better, I will jump on. Yeah. If it's something that you are just lazy and you're like, here's my baby dream project, and you don't know nor want to learn how to do it, I'm like, no, I'll give you the tools where you can figure out that, but I don't need to be a part of that. If I have more passion than you in your project, we've got a problem.
And I think there's situations, and myself included, where I kind of want to get my feet wet with a lot of different facets of the entertainment industry. And one of them that I don't have yet is, filmmaking. And, I went to Cégep in Montreal in Canada. You do 2 years of pre-college, and I did film studies and I did film communication production. And a lot of my classmates, it's funny, 10 years later, they're on, shows on Netflix like Lock and Key and everything. And I'm always like, I started, and it's kind of full circle because I've been interviewing a lot of storytellers like yourself on my show, and I'm getting inspired to actually finish the scripts that I started, 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
To do it, and you start small. You know what I mean? Start something that's 3 minutes, and then craft it and see what happens. And it, have the willingness to fail. Because if you go in and you're like, oh, this is not coming out perfect, you're more apt to give up. I'm not saying you as a person, but just people in general. Yeah. They're more apt to I don't know about that. And also seek help. Everyone right now, especially in 2020, is looking to keep their hands busy and to be inspired. And it's just get the idea on paper first and then try to make your roadmap and see what can come out of it. You don't know, because what's ironic about the podcast thing, the way media started was storytelling, right? You've got caveman storytelling and then plays and whatnot. And then we had radio serials. And now we're back to that.
Essentially, the podcast was basically like like iPod, right? Like Apple, like podcast. You know what I mean? A webcast, a radio cast, a broadcast. That's basically what it is. Like people think like podcast, this whole thing. It's basically like an internet radio show, basically.
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Tamela, you can go that route. You can go that route.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Plug away. Where can people follow you on social media? And your film comes out pretty soon as well.
Yeah, November 16th, One Little Finger is released worldwide on all streaming platforms. And anyone can follow me on all my social media at Tamela D'Amico. It's TameladAmico. Amazing.
Well, congratulations with all the success you've had in all your different fields, because you wear many hats and we see it, and it's awesome and it's inspiring. And good luck with the film when it comes out. Everyone's going to watch it. It's going to be exciting.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Tamela D'Amico and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.